Hello, welcome to Miss Peepers Reading Corner. I'm Katrina, aka Miss Peepers. Let's talk about books. Today we're doing a book tag. This is the Reluctant book tag created by Chloe Frizzle. I will link to her below. She has a delightful channel and this looks like a really fun tag, so I thought I would do it. I have a lot of books in my TBR or to be read, specifically lots of books that I physically own. This is Baroness T'Challa von Schnoodle. Specifically books that I own because I love having books around me and I can't stop. But I don't mind. Some people don't want to have a bunch of books that they haven't read. They find it stressful, they find it oppressive. I personally love the idea that there are so many books that whenever I'm looking for a book, I can find something in my house that I haven't read, and any book could be your next favorite. So that's my perspective. I also have the space for it, so I know I'm privileged in that way, but let's talk about the Reluctant TBR. So the idea behind this tag is that particularly if you're a voracious reader, and a lot of booktubers do this, you tend to accumulate a long list of books that you're totally going to read at some point. And there are far too many books in the world for any one person to read all of them in a lifetime. And so you got to pick and choose, and that can be hard sometimes. So this tag is about books that you want to read, but some part of you is maybe afraid to read or doesn't want to read or something along those lines. So let's get into the prompts. T'Challa is rubbing her face on the giant stack of books that I have here that I set aside. There are 15 prompts. Please don't knock it over. Prompt number 1, a book that you want to read, but it was a soft DNF or soft did not finish. And for me, that book is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. I really do want to read this. I tried to read this a couple years ago. I mean, you can see I put some tabs in. I think I got about a third of the way through. This is a stream of consciousness story about a woman who is preparing for a party. And so you go through her preparations, but also her reflections on her life so far. She runs into someone that she hasn't seen in a long time. She's thinking about the life that she has built. And this is beautifully written. When I picked this up, I did not realize what a challenging read it was going to be. I just picked the wrong time. I was busy with a lot of things. I was kind of stressed out with stuff. What I needed at that time was not a challenging book, but rather a really easy book. I do intend to pick this up again at some point, but I need to be in a space where I'm ready to really, I think this is one that I'm going to really annotate properly because there's so much going on. Prompt number 2 is you want to read this book, but you read another book by the same author and didn't like it. Now, if you've been here in the reading corner for a while, you may recall that I attempted to read Middlemarch and I really did not like Middlemarch, but I do still have Adam Bede by George Eliot here in my collection. I actually have Ethan Frome as well somewhere in these shelves that I also have not read. I do actually want to read this. One of my challenges with Middlemarch is that it was so long, it was such a slow start that I could not get into it. I just didn't care about most of the characters. My hope is this is a little more compact, so the storytelling is going to have to be tighter, I hope. And this is about 3 people who are unwisely in love and what happens as a result of that. This sounds fun. Again, I don't know, maybe George Eliot is not the author for me, but I do want to give her another chance. And so Adam Bede is on my list. Prompt number 3, you want to read this book, but it's brand new and you don't know when you'll get to it. This isn't exactly brand new, but it's fairly new. And that is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. So I am actually really excited about this book. However, before I read this, I want to read David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, which is the inspiration for this book. So this is a retelling of David Copperfield set in the Appalachian Mountains, and it sounds really interesting and people have been loving this book. I want to read David Copperfield first. I've seen adaptations of it, and so I know the story. That's not the issue. It's nice. These would be 2 good books to read together. David Copperfield is also on my soft DNF list because I tried to read that and Don Quixote at the same time, and one of them had to go, and yeah, Don Quixote and it was personal. I have a video on that. Prompt number 4 made me chuckle, which is you want to read this book, but the cover is painfully ugly. Of course, we are all told don't judge a book by its cover, but the truth is marketing is a thing. Book covers are designed to catch the eye. And book covers also go through design trends just like everything else. And so this is probably not fair of me, but I just do not like the style of these covers. This book was written in the early 50s, but this copy was published in the late 60s, and it is Isaac Asimov's The Caves of Steel. Asimov is of course a classic science fiction writer, and I haven't read a lot. I've read I, Robot, but that's about it. And that felt wrong. So when I saw this in a used bookstore, I grabbed it, but I just don't like the 60s sci-fi covers. I just don't. So it's not very inviting to me, but I'm gonna have to get over that. I do, and this might be a little bit controversial, but I do like that this is an older kind of like yellowing copy. I do like that that feel of a book that's been around for a while. But the cover though. Prompt number 5, you want to read this book, and it's a classic that might be good for you, but you're not excited about it. And I don't have the cover for this because I did try to read it. I think I need a different translation. This is The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. And I think I might need a different translation. I've read Les Miserables some years ago and really, really liked it, despite that being much more of a beast than this, although this is probably an abridged version as well. Anyway, it's a Barnes & Noble Classics edition. Yeah, I tried to read this and it was just so dry at the beginning that I could not get to the actual story, like the introductory stuff. And I know from reading Les Miserables that Victor Hugo liked his tangents and he liked to go off on different topics that weren't necessarily directly pertinent to the story. So I was expecting that, but I was not expecting it to be the first chapter. And maybe that first chapter is really relevant, but the writing was just so dry. But it's a translation from French, and so my thought is it's possible that just this translation is not for me. So if you've read The Hunchback of Notre Dame and really liked it, if you know which translation you have, I'd love to know, because I really think that's the problem. But I'll give it another try with a different edition, not this one. I'll probably unhaul this one eventually. Prompt number 6, you want to read this book, but it is humongous and intimidating. I have a lot of big books in my collection, both read and not yet read. As I mentioned earlier in the video, and I haven't mentioned this on my channel for a while, so we'll go with it. I read Don Quixote. That's humongous and intimidating, and I'm inordinately proud of myself. However, this book is actually not that big, but it looks much bigger than it is. And that is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. Now, when I have seen people talk about this book on BookTube, they hold it like this. It doesn't look like, that big of a deal, right? But then I saw it in the bookstore, in the used bookstore, and I was like, whoa, that's huge. This book is as big as my head. But it's not actually that long. It's like just over 800 pages, which I realize to some viewers is going to sound really, really long, but this looks like a 1,500 page book, but it's not. So I think it's just the pages are thick, the margins are actually kind of big. So I don't know, it's smaller than it looks. I was just thinking as I was getting ready for this video, like the logistics of reading this book, I'm gonna have to figure out a stand. At least the cover bends really nicely. Someone else cracked the spine, otherwise I totally would have done it. But this has been getting a lot of love on BookTube and just in general, and I do enjoy a good fantasy. So I'll let you know when I get to this one. Prompt number 7, you feel like you need to read this book because it's hyped, but you're not excited about it. And I wouldn't say I'm unexcited about this book, but I've gone back and forth because the reviews are very, very mixed. And that is Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Obviously I have a copy, which means I plan to read it. So this book is, I believe, about game designers and the sort of the intersection of the digital and physical worlds. If I'm completely off base, let me know. I'm going off of memory here, but It sounds really interesting. It definitely sounds up my alley. When I've heard people describe it, it gives me a little bit of like Ready Player One vibes, without, I think, the dystopia. But I've also heard that the disability representation in this is not great. So that kind of tempered my excitement about this book a little bit. But I do want to read it for myself and come to my own conclusion. And so I'll get there eventually. I do really like this cover. Prompt number 8, you want to read this book, but you need to be in a specific mood to enjoy it. I'm already a mood reader, so I kind of have to be in a mood for any book. That's why I tend to have so many books going on at once as well. And I eventually settled on this book that has been out for a while, but I still haven't read it. It's Freedom by Jonathan Franzen. I actually haven't read anything by Jonathan Franzen. It came out in 2010. It was very, very hyped, of course, at that time. I picked it up. I never actually read it. I think one of the things that's causing me hesitation on this one is that my understanding is this book is about a marriage that is sort of unraveling, and that's fine. My marriage is perfectly sound, don't worry. But it's always a tough kind of thing to read about. So I feel like I have to be in a sort of mood. My understanding is this is not an uplifting book in any way. And I can read a sad book or sort of a depressing book, but I've got to be in the right headspace for it. Prompt number 9, you want to read this book, but you're on the fence about whether to continue this series. This was a tough one for me too, because I don't read a ton of series, or when I do read a series, I tend to like commit to it. I did find this one on my shelf. It's Margaret Atwood's The Year of the Flood, and it's the sequel to Oryx and Crake. I read Oryx and Crake a very long time ago, and I remember enjoying it. So it's not that I didn't like the book, but rather I feel like if I'm going to read a sequel to a book that I read so long ago, I might want to reread it to refresh my memory on what even happened and who these people are. I don't know whether this works as a semi-standalone or not. But because it's been so long, I don't know who these people are anymore. Prompt number 10, you want to read this book, but it's been on your TBR for a very long time. I've been making a little bit of an effort to read the books that I've had for a while, but I have been collecting books for a very long time. And so there are a lot of books that I've purchased that I just haven't gotten to yet, or acquired in some way. This one I think was actually gifted, but the book I have here it's called The Malcontents. That's a dead fly on the front there. It's a collection of bitter, cynical, and satirical writing. And so it's essays and stories and different things. And it's also, according to Goodreads, this is the biggest book in my collection. Read and unread. It's got, 1,200 pages, almost 1,100 pages. So big book. I do read anthologies, but not often. And sometimes I'll come and go on an anthology. So I can see reading a little bit and then setting it down and picking it up again. Prompt number 11, you want to read this book, but it's a genre outside of your comfort zone. I don't know if comfort zone is quite the right word for this, but I don't read a lot of books in this genre, which is the genre of spy novels. But I have an edition of 3 books by John le Carré. It has Call for the Dead, A Murder of Quality, and The Spy Who Came in from the Cold. Now, A Murder of Quality is a top tier title. I just don't read a lot of spy novels, and so this is not something that is at the forefront of my mind when I reach for a book. There was a period in my life when I was acquiring a lot of multiple novels in one volume. I don't know why. Well, I know why. This still has the sticker on it. I got this in the bargain bin for just under $10, so $9.98. So I think that's probably part of it. But yeah. So both of those things, the genre and the fact that it's multiple novels in one bind up, are slowing down its pace in my TBR, but eventually I'm sure this will rise to the top. Prompt number 12 requires you to look in the mirror and really be honest with yourself. I want to read this book, but despite owning it, I will likely never read it. And this took me some time and some contemplation. And I landed on, this hurts a little bit, but I landed on Mythos by Stephen Fry. I really like how this is written. So this is basically rewriting, not really retelling, but like telling mythological Greek stories. And I started reading it, and it just sort of reads like a textbook to me. It's kind of shaped like a textbook. It's got like the pictures and the writing, and it kind of gave me school vibes, and I don't know, I wasn't loving it. I might try the audiobook because Stephen Fry is a fantastic audiobook narrator, so maybe that's the way I should go with this one rather than try to read it physically. But if I don't do that, I probably will not read this, which is unfortunate. Prompt number 13, you want to read this book, but it's an obligation to a book club or it's a friend's recommendation. So I'm not in any formal book clubs right now, but I do have a book that was a recommendation from a friend that who spoke very, very highly of this book. And I think it is a good book, and I've heard good things about it too. It is, I'm gonna mangle this Russian author's name, for which I apologize. It is Cancer Ward by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. This is a Russian novel from 1968, so it is in translation. So when I was in college, I took a course on Russian literature, and I think it focused largely on Dostoevsky, but we read a few other authors as well. And I like Dostoevsky, but he's certainly a very specific mood, which is just really sad and depressing. And then when I first got this, I didn't really look into it. It was just, oh, you said this was good, I'll give it a try. I gotta stop doing that. But I just love books so much. And when I got it, I realized that it is a Russian book. And it does have those same kind of dreary, sort of snow-covered vibes, the worst of winter sort of vibes. I don't know if it's set in winter, but like that, you know, that kind of feeling. I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I do enjoy Russian literature, so I'm not trying to say that that's a bad thing per se, but you've got to be in the right headspace for it. Kind of like a number of the books that I'm talking about in this video. So it's kind of sitting there, but it's not like an active recommendation. It's not like this person who recommended it is asking me every week, have you read it yet? Have you read it? So we're okay there. I don't feel a sense of obligation to them to read it per se, but it's a friend recommendation, and that's why I have it. Prompt number 14, you want to read this book, but negative reviews have you less than excited. Yeah, I got one of those. And that is The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. People who love The Goldfinch love The Goldfinch. People who hate The Goldfinch hate The Goldfinch. I attempted to watch the movie. I got kind of bored, I'm not gonna lie, but I still have the book. I already had the book when I tried to watch the movie. So I'm gonna try it. I do know that Donna Tartt has some controversy around her, so I do want to acknowledge that. But yeah, I do want to try this book. It won a Pulitzer. Someone liked it. Winning a Pulitzer does not automatically mean that I'm gonna like the book, but you know, we'll see. I do not have a book for the last prompt, and you're about to find out why. This is a book you want to read, but it hasn't come out yet. I am not a person who receives ARCs. I don't seek them out. So that is advanced reader copies, but I wait for books to be available to the general public before I read them. So I don't have any books that don't come out. I'm also really, really bad at paying attention to what books are coming soon, mainly because I have such a backlog. So unless it's a very specific author that I like, I'm paying attention to, or I hear something, you know, the word on the street or whatever, I don't typically know when something's coming out. So I did a little research for this one, very little research. I came across a book that has my name all over it. And this is a Japanese book called Will Prescribe You a Cat by Shio Ishido. I hope I pronounced that name properly. It's a novel about this clinic that I guess is sort of obscure and hidden, and when you find it, whatever your ailment is, they prescribe you a cat. So it's about the healing power of cats, and you follow various patients who have taken this cat that they have been given as a treatment for their ailment, and it shows the relationships and how they build with that particular animal. And as a cat lover, as you know, you saw T'Challa von Schnoodle earlier in this video. She pops up a lot because this is the chair she likes to nap in. She's napping behind me right now. I'm a little bit to the front, so she has her napping spot. So I definitely believe in the healing power of cats, not to the exclusion, of course, of modern medicine and other treatments, but If you have an ailment of the soul, a cat can certainly help with that. Or 5, as in my case. And the final portion, prompt 16, is to tag people. So I'll tag a few people. So I'm going to tag books I'm not reading. So Kelly, you're it. I'm going to tag 4 Paws in a Book. And also I'm going to tag a new booktuber that I just came across, Robert G., Reader of Books. What a great title. So I hope that the 3 of you do the tag, but also anyone else who is interested. This is a really fun tag to do, and it made me dig through my inventory of books and see what I wanted to read. And of course, thank you again to Chloe Frizzle. Please check her out. I will link to her original video below. And if you're watching this and you don't make a video, or you don't have a channel, so you're not gonna make a video, I'd love to hear in the comments what your answers are to these questions, and of the books that I called out, if you've read any of these, do you think I should move them up or down my TBR list? Let me know. And either way, I will see you in the next one.